My name is Dustin Kelly, but everybody calls me DJ. I'm prior Army, serving as both a Ford observer and a military police officer. I spent the last 14 and a half years as a police officer and detective in a large metropolitan police department. Two things that I've learned throughout my career. One, everybody has a story to tell. And two, the best stories are true. This is the DTD Podcast. In 3, 2, 1, and we're live. What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the DTD Podcast. This week in the studio, a man who in 27 years rose from the rank of the Enlisted to becoming the Commanding Officer of Foxtrot 2nd Marine Special Operations Battalion, Marine Special Operations Command. On March 4, 2007, his career took an unbelievable turn when his convoy was attacked in a complex ambush and his Marines returned fire. This is where this story goes horribly wrong. Before even returning to their fire base, word had spread like wildfire that his unit had attacked and killed numerous civilians, including women and children. They became known as the MARSOC 7, and their court of inquiry became the longest war crimes trial in Marine Corps history at 3.5 weeks long and introducing over 40 witnesses and 5,000 pages of documentation. As hard as the government tried, they could not bring this elite warrior or the men under his watch and command down. He was victorious in the courtroom with no charges ever being filed on he or his Marines. But was it too much? Along his career, he was divorced twice and ultimately and unjustly turned down for further progression in command and rank. He's here to tell the complete story and answer the question, was it all worth it? I'm honored to introduce you to Major Fred Galvin, retired United States Marine Corps. How are you, my friend?
Very good, DJ. Thank you for having me as your guest.
Yeah, I am so looking forward to talking to you about this, and we have a ton of things to cover about this, mostly because of the facts that there are so many tiny little details in this story that makes such a big impact on the finale of it. So I want to get started, and I talked to you before we started recording, and I said that an important thing in your book to me was when you talked about your dad. Now, I want to say, first off, that I think he had a humongous impact on what you did for these Marines later and how you carried yourself while in the Marine Corps. You describe your father in the book as by saying many, if not most sons, want to be like their fathers. Your father was a bully, an alcoholic, a womanizer, and a wife beater. And at 3 years old, you saw extreme violence in him. And then at 13 years old, it kind of came full circle. So I want to talk about your childhood, your 5 brothers and sisters, and kind of what this man instilled in you at that early age.
Yes, well, just like is mentioned in the book, those are my own words there. It's exactly accurate. Saw some extreme violence in the home, and a person who's unable to manage a family. That has really been important, as you mentioned. I've seen throughout my life, and especially later on in life, those effects of not just when somebody, and I'm not against, some crazy rules that you can't have any alcohol or anything like this at all. But when people get enslaved to that and it controls their mind and their decisions and their actions, that's a whole nother story. Unfortunately, that happens to so many individuals, and there's various reasons why. Why it happened to my dad, I was too young to understand. I just saw the result of that. And one of those results was the negative side that you're seeing as a kid. Some of the positive is in the situation with our family, it led me to completely do a 180 and realize, some, like I say in the book, some people look to their father and they think that's macho, and they go down that road, and it turns into a self-fulfilling prophecy in future generations. I rejected that and went another direction. So I I didn't really analyze it until, this is 15 years after this ambush. Uh, it's been there's been time for me to process what has happened. So um, I realized that what happened in that book is probably something that now I look back with appreciation for, since uh, I, I know this sounds somewhat arrogant and everything, but the amount of people who have reached out that I've served with that said no one has gone, and they actually reached out to my mother and said, no other, even before I wrote a book, they didn't know anything about our family situation. They just said, none of these other war crimes cases, and these are actually the moms of people charged in Haditha and Hamdaniya, calling my mom because their sons, were feeling the heat and saying that nobody in their command ever stood up for them. Um, and I think some people probably did to different degrees, and I'm not trying to diminish or throw stones, but I spent some time in organizations, and unlike other commissioned officers, I I believed, they told us at the infantry officer course, if you ever go into the reconnaissance community, don't stay long and don't ever go back. It'll destroy your career. I fully understood what I was doing, but that mission that you do and the caliber of American men that are doing that mission are it's almost intoxicating. And I think that led me into a direction to want what I believe a lot of those men in that community also wanted. They came from broken homes. These weren't, I'm not trying to, I'm just making comparisons of what I've seen over my years. A lot of Navy SEALs, uh, why are they good in water? Well, because they've had experience in water. Usually that takes families of affluence, not just to be comfortable in water, but to have mastery of those types of skills that you need as a Navy SEAL. Those are people that had two-parent families normally, and spent a lot of time nurturing those families. That's a totally different animal than someone that came from the broken home. They saw conflict. They saw um, a lot of things that they knew were wrong, and they sought something of a family as a profession. And many of us, include myself and those I served with, got in the Marines and saw, hey, this isn't exactly the what I anticipated, and it led them into a direction of being assigned to all volunteer units where it was complete commitment is what was required. And I think that's a big differentiator of serving in units like Force Reconnaissance and Marine Special Operations. Is yes, there can be families that were very nurturing and provided, and they were athletically and have all these talents and gifts. But back in those days, Force Reconnaissance was very different than Marine Special Operations is now. Um, we always used to say, and I put it in the book, it's what they can guarantee you is PMS every day, not just once a month. It's pain, misery, and suffering, and that's what they promise, and that's what is actually delivered effectively. And the job is, some perceive it from the outside like it's sexy, but it's definitely not. And it breeds a caliber of individual that, if that's all you promise, and you're not promising any bonus pays or uh, anything that most people desire, you're going to get a caliber of individual that is there for the very pure reasons. And it's humbling to serve with people like that. But I do think, like you said, DJ, a lot of that unwittingly came from how I was raised. Um, Having a father I wanted to have nothing in common with um, allowed me, in having a broken home where if we wanted anything, I'm talking like milk, we had to work, we had to go swim in golf courses and fish out golf balls, cut grass, paint houses, do it, whatever odd jobs were available, packaging up leaflets from my mom's, the business that she worked for. Um, did whatever we could spring, summer, and fall to make some money. And the Marine Corps was exactly what I wanted at 17 years old. And I didn't know anything about the Marine Corps, and until a kid in my high school was telling me, hey, he knew I wanted to join the military, and I just clueless as to which branch. And he's like, the Marines, they have this motto, the first to fight. and the president can send them in without Congress, like for 180 days. I was like, man, that sounds awesome. And
Well, let me point out
so,
something when you say that, because I want to kind of go back to your father for just a minute. At 13 years old, your father shows up at the house. He starts pushing you around. Now, you'd been doing martial arts since you were like 3 years old. You'd
5.
got 5. I'm sorry. You'd gotten a little size on you. He was really nothing for you. When you talk about first to fight, it almost makes me think once again, because there were so many points in this book where I thought back to this. Your father comes home, you stand up to him, kind of protect everyone in the house, and you seem to have done that all the way through your career. What I want to know, though, mentally at 13 years old, you're standing up to a grown man who you know is your father, who you, by your own account, did not have a good relationship with. What is going through your mind, and what are you trying to accomplish at that age doing that?
At that age, I think there was a repetition, like, this isn't a one off. This has to be stopped. So I think, it was just that time. And there hadn't been some prior event like that where it was like a call out. And, but just like it says in the book, I had been trained by a sensei. I wasn't some kid that wanted to go to karate practice and do a little this and for a belt. And that's what I really thank my sensei for, is, you know, focusing on what, Roikyu Kempo, Okinawan karate was there for. And it was there for defending when you are attacked. And at that point, I knew, like, okay, this is going in that direction. Uh, it's actually kind of strange because when I was 5 years old, I went with my older brother, who's about 10 years older than I am. And he started me out in judo. And this guy was actually from Japan. And, as a 10-year-old kid getting thrown around, literally hip thrown over the shoulder by teenage kids, you're hitting that mat so hard. It took some of the enjoyment out of it. And then I was actually looking in they had some periodicals, and as a kid we didn't have the magic squares and the internet to fill our minds with. So
Right.
there was anything that you could get your hands on to read. You're in the Midwest, especially in the wintertime, not a lot to do unless you're outdoors. So picked up this thing and I saw they're having this karate class at this youth center down the road. So I went. That was what I was very interested in, and so I went straight from judo to karate. And my sensei there, he was also a true believer, and his sensei was a pure blood Okinawan you know master, and he knew, so this guy lived and walked the walk even after I retired. I went back there and he's still teaching judo, Roikyu Kempo, Okinawan karate, and kung fu. That was his life, and he lived it. So he taught in the mindset of us. And there was a few of us that stuck around and went beyond this little course, and as far as we could go until did stop in high school when the competitive sports and academics kind of led me to have to make a decision. But so he would say, like, you need to do some of these exercises, different grappling things, like 500 times a day. And so I was a little kid, and especially during the summer and on the weekends, the 500 was the minimum to me. I would do them 1,000 times a day and I was just doing these exercises, and it was building muscle and bulk from just, where we lived. I loved to do that. And there was a couple older kids actually I had one peer of mine that was my age, and we were good, close friends, Mitch. And the rest of the kids in the neighborhood, there's very few girls, but there was a lot of guys, and they were all about 4 or 5 years older. And then, so what do you love to do in the Midwest? You love to wrestle and fight. And what was enjoyable for us at that stage in the game when I was a little kid was they used to have wrestling on television, and that was entertainment. But the older kids took it as, this is real. So, they would put your head in between their legs and give you a pile driver and not realize like what kind of damage you do.
Yeah.
But when you're a little kid, that hurt bad. Like,
here's some kid twice your age, twice your size in some cases, giving you a pile driver, and just doing all kinds of so. Uh, I think some of the martial arts were actually out of survival, DJ. It was not like, I just want to do this for giggles. It was out of necessity. And like if you want to survive, and all the kids in your neighborhood were 4 or 5 years or more older, and when I say 4 or 5, those are the ones that were still silly enough to realize maybe they thought it was fun to pick on a kid. The ones who were older than that, they would scrap, but then they started doing other things when they got in the teenage years, riding motorcycles or chasing after girls and driving cars. Uh, but it was the ones that were just under that, not able to drive. They loved to, get up after you, and so that's what led me to martial arts, and allowed my mind to focus on doing things not for proficiency or excellence. And I know in the Marines we say, hey, you do things for standards of excellence, not mastery. That was not the way we did things in with my sensei. He taught mastery. I mean, everything from Makata to actually randuri, where you're sparring, everything was done to perfection. And I took that on my mindset personally, that mastery isn't good enough. I want absolute perfection. And I think some of that has stayed with me through my life. Is you train till you're at a position where you can just dominate your opponent, and it's in your mind that, yeah, they can inflict pain. In that, as a leader, you will experience that. Somebody is going to hurt you. There's going to be unfair fighting from multiple people, but you must have that mindset where you're thinking multiple steps ahead, and you have so many tools and moves that you can apply, a technique that's just going to inflict further pain. So as a kid, this is what I was doing. I remember taking the city bus every day of the week down to either the city park or to actually a couple of different community colleges that he also taught at, and his house. Um, Various times of the year we do it indoor or outdoor, but this was something I normally do about 5 days a week with my sensei, or 7 days a week, by myself. And it's something I loved. It was passion, and but I think in those days it was great. If you read books like The Outliers, and you realize in order to have mastery, you must have the initiative, the drive, but you also have to have instruction from somebody that is a master, not just somebody that's mildly amused and has some techniques, but somebody who is truly a master. And then you have to do that after you receive that training. You have to do that on your own, and work to perfection. So at 13, I was by no means some kind of expert on this, but I was going to these community colleges, and I remember the college I went to finally down the road get my MBA at. My sensei was teaching there at the University of Missouri, Kansas City. I'd take the city bus down there when he started teaching, and these guys were in college. And I remember they were fighting for a grade, and they'd start trying to come after me. And I was just some teenage kid, much smaller, and for them it was on because they had to, they wanted to fight for this grade. But it was, when you have mastering, you have the technique. It's, I won't say it's easy to dominate, but you just have much greater experience in fighting, and being able to anticipate what somebody's likely going to do based on their patterns, and the likelihood of how they can and can't perform. So,
well, I think the most interesting part of that, when your dad came back and you kind of stood him down and he left, after all this, your mom left him that year and she divorced him. Do you think she took some of that strength from you on that? Because it seems like there was a paradigm shift in everybody's life that year.
Yes. And I haven't really thought deeply about that, even though after retiring the last 8.5 years, I had my mom live with me to help her out. What I will say is, I don't think that event of standing up to him was a catalyst. Maybe it was, but I will say that it may not have been a decision point for my mother, other than that did take some things into action where my dad put a for sale sign in the yard with that, undiscussed and unannounced. He just stopped by and decided he's going to sell that house. And we weren't in good communication. He would, just come by and say these, awful things. So when that happened, my mom, she was never dated, afterwards at all, to this day. But, she realized in the Catholic Church at that time that, it was kind of very shameful to get a divorce and you couldn't have communion. And it was, small town like that. It was really embarrassing. So she tried not to until the house went up for sale. And then she realized she didn't have a choice. She went across the street and asked a neighbor, and she's like, you've got to get a lawyer and fight for yourself, because this guy's going to sell your house and you'll be out on the street. Again, DJ, like some of those lessons, and you see like somebody that would do that to their family, to their own children, that did instill some things in my mind where it's like, okay, that for sure led me to think differently. It programmed me differently. And I've never talked about this other than writing it in the book, because you're the first one to ask, but it led me to lead differently in the Marines, to include that first deployment into combat as a young enlisted Marine, where I was like, okay, we literally weren't trained well. And I realized that if I was ever a leader making decisions on training, I will take complete ownership of that, and I will treat the Marines and train them as best I can. And I had this, not an ego or narcissistic, but it was a reputation that a lot of people thought the training was just out of control. And it was just so much that this guy's just hell-bent on training. And it wasn't like, hey, I'm, Bobby Knight, just driving a team, for, ridiculous reasons. But in a gun battle, there's only one winner. Sometimes there's none. But you need to have that mindset. And that's how I had been raised, is to dominate your adversary, completely dominate, and have them know it, and have their other competitors, they're out there, realize that when these guys come in and they're dressed like this and they look like this and they approach at this time and in this manner, that you better, just submit. Because, and we had that reputation, as I made mention in the book, on one of these deployments in Iraq. Our interpreter had said the way that we were apprehending these people in the middle of the night, they thought there was aliens that would just abduct these people, because all of a sudden these guys would just vanish, unheard of how we're getting in or out. And that kind of psychological, warfare on people is very, very effective. Just like Sun Tzu said, it's the best to defeat your adversary without having to draw your sword. And that's our objective, as I also wrote in the book, was not to get in a gun battle and get killed. A lot of people thought, especially on prior Iraq deployments, that we were kind of wimpish because we wouldn't get in a decisive engagement. But that wasn't our job, is to get in there and sling lead and get into a deep firefight. And we've been in those, but that's some people went out there looking for that and tried to start that. That's my commitment again was to those who were my family, and I wasn't going to let some bad decision lead us into something where somebody has less of a chance of surviving and could be wounded very severely. So,
let me ask you, and maybe I misunderstood it in the book, but you never lost a soldier, right? Under your
That's
command?
right.
Never.
That's right.
So I think that that's not a thing that we should gloss over very well. I mean, you talked about that they thought the training was crazy and stuff, but it paid off in spades in the end. You didn't lose one soldier under your command.
And it is a point to draw out, because I made mention right before the war kicked off in Iraq, there were 3 serious fatalities at the unit that I was going to, at 1st Force Reconnaissance Company. And the Marine Corps prior to the evolution of Marine Special Operations, force reconnaissance was the very elite. So they had a helicopter crash, then they had a skydiving accident, then they had a shooting accident, all resulted in not injuries, but fatalities. So that in those types of units, you're not kind of pushing the envelope a little, you're peeling it all the way back. And you're pushing these things to extremes, and everybody in those units that's supporting those units, the aviators that are flying you in, the aviators that are dropping aviation ordnance. I mean, it's as realistic and as live as you can get it. And that led to a lot of fatalities. Then on one deployment that we went into Iraq, we replaced a platoon that had 22 out of 24 of the Marines wounded or killed. So
I'm glad you mentioned that, because I was going to bring that up next.
Yes. And so whether it's training or actual combat, it is a thinking man's game. And I also don't want to paint a picture that, I, by any means, am some great military tactician. That was something I committed my entire life to, everything I could. But if someone is out there and they are a gunfighter, they carry a gun for a living, whether they're in the military or they're in law enforcement. One of the things I would recommend is they get their life straight with God, because there's things that no matter how good you think you are, you cannot control. You can try to influence things, but if you don't get yourself right in your mind and your heart with God, there will be times when likely an individual will hesitate. This isn't Hollywood. You're not Leonidas out there, and it's not glorious and sexy to die. American culture is to preserve life and to, pursue happiness. And some people pursue greed. So there's a lot of hesitation. And when you get your life completely right and you know what you're there to do, you develop plans and you execute those plans violently to give yourself the advantage. But you try to, an officer's job is to regulate the violence and to see, things that could be coming and anticipate things, and not to completely get sucked into the center of the violence or to react with emotion at all. And that's very, very difficult when you're in something that, you see a car bomb, you're taking immediate action, you're shooting individuals, you're hearing the sounds, all, 4 to 5 of your senses can actually be engaged in battle. That's something that most people don't ever experience. And that's not what we're trained to in the 21st century, and not in America, to engage someone where there's a car bomb that goes off and it's utilized, planned and designed with fuel to burn and cause excruciating pain where people scream. That's not something that is experienced on the streets of anywhere in America. But that was reality for many Americans for 20 years, where they just continue to escalate the horror and the violence against us. And we were trying to fight back with this baloney of hearts and minds. And that's where things, a little bit different portion of the story, but a bit more is where things became immoral.
So let me ask you, though, you mentioned that we also talked about 22 out of 24 or 23 out of 25 casualties out of a unit. So your guys know what they're getting into. It's fully volunteer. You know what you're getting into. But you see that before you take over. It's got to switch the mindset up in your guys. So how do you keep driving them forward to go, look, I know they got decimated over here. This is what we're going to do to not follow in that pursuit.
Yes. I can't speak for everybody even in the platoon that I led. So there's 25 of us on different deployments. Sometimes the number changed just a little. As the years went on, we realized we need to plus ourselves up a little bit more. But so I can't speak for everybody. However, I would like to say that I'm not saying this because the Marines I served were warriors, and they accepted that my life could be required of me tonight and every night that we went out. And we went out during days and we did very dangerous helicopter hard hits right in the middle of the day when they'd see a drone would, be showing that there was some missiles or rockets, I should say, being transported. I mean, we did some things that were downright dangerous, we knew could kill us and likely would kill us, just because we're going to a position of extreme risk. And anyway, we did these missions, and a lot of these missions, some of them we got ambushed on. And I've had a lot of friends contact me, social media, and they text me. They send me, "Hey, why didn't you put all this stuff in the book that we did?" And it's like, hey, look, we had to get it down. We had to cut over 25% of a lot of that combat action out, because it is what it is. People read books, and marketers know it. Publishers realize that people don't read long books. Their job is to sell a book, a publisher, and some really like that, but we don't go to the niche. They try to go to the mass. But what I'm saying is, there was many things that were not included in the book, and we were ambushed on multiple times. Again, that led me to increase my faith, because I'm realizing, like, this has happened again and again and again. I've seen what this has done to other units and other Marines. You see helicopters coming back. You see planes draped with flags getting pushed onto a plane and flown out. You were seeing that on a daily basis on these deployments. So you realize the gravity of what you're doing. And in some of these ambushes, I remember going back after it was over. We'd be out for several days, just hitting targets one after the next, multiple targets each night. And you get back, people would be exhausted, and but you're out there in the desert of Iraq, and it's pitch black, especially before the moonrise. You can't see anything. There's no cultural lighting. And I remember hearing some of our guys, after coming out of we'd scrape up what we could intelligence-wise, trying to get information from people we had detained. And, far after the mission's over, I'm walking back to get my head down for a little bit. And I'd hear people, some of the guys in my own platoon would be like, hey, they'd be telling, in their mind what they had experienced and sensed, and, how they were managing the fear. The people would say, it sounded like, I've heard other people tell me at other times, how concerned they were, or they thought that on the radio I was sounding like I was falling asleep. I'm not some superhuman or like Superman where I'm just like, nothing impacts me and I can just take a bullet. Not at all. But when you have given complete commitment, and that's to me like the definition of love. And if you are a Christian and you believe that, hey, this is what I was created to do and called to do, and I'm here to do it no matter what. And some people have a hard time, especially if you're married and you have kids. There's things going on inside your head that make it difficult for you to completely let go. But it's just like when you're doing some of the training that we do in the Marines, getting sharked at the bottom of the pool, when you're doing some training for your dive training, getting bounced off the bottom, by a huge person who's an instructor, and you just have to kind of let go and get comfortable that you're gonna feel the pain. And it's gonna be miserable, and you're gonna suffer.
What year did you go to dive school?
So dive school actually came to us. So it came to Okinawa.
Oh, really? Because I went at Ford Island in Hawaii, and I had some of your Okinawa guys in my class.
Yeah. So
yeah, I know exactly what you're saying, though. When you're talking about that, you just got to kind of shut off everything around you and focus on what has to be done.
Right. So in 1999, they had a mobile training team that came out. And instead of, I'm not trying to make any comparisons, but the instructors from dive school in Panama City, Florida, they didn't want to be away from their families any longer than they had to. So they did a 6-day-a-week program instead of a 5-day-a-week program. And the difference between Panama City, I would say that what I've heard from many people, especially that went in spring break, is the most difficult thing in Panama City is keeping your mind off of those bikinis on the beach and because you're not just doing the physical training and the pool work, you're having to study dive medicine, uh, physiology, tables for decompression, and planning your dive. There's a lot to you have to mentally and physically concentrate on. And when some people are in their early 20s, even younger, that is very hard to do when there's so much that can distract you outside the gate. So in Okinawa, we didn't have any of that. So I would rather take the heat, hills, and the current of the Sea of Japan than having been down in having to go through Panama City, which I didn't have to. Maybe in some ways I would have enjoyed that, but some guys were saying that was pretty rough because it's hard for some folks not to knock a few of those soldiers back and enjoy the sights and sounds of Panama City.
So, in saying all that, because you've went to as you go over there, you've been to jump school, dive school, you've done all these different things. Do you think that I think the biggest thing for me reading your book that helped you also as an officer was being enlisted, because you saw it from both ends of the spectrum, not only the schools, but you saw it from a different perspective that I don't think, and I think you would agree, a lot of officers see, because they come in as officers and they never see that other side of the world.
Yeah, that is true. And I'd also like to add to that things have changed over the years with how military members are compensated, uh, whether they're officer or enlisted. And so now what we've seen, and we're going to probably see more, unfortunately, because less and less people want to join the military. We're seeing every branch of the service, especially the Army. Like here, we're less than 3 months till the end of the fiscal year, and the Army has not even met 40% of their recruiting goals. So this is serious because the Marines, we are a very small branch, and you don't win wars, especially against a superpower like China and or Russia with the Marine Corps. It takes the Army. I'm not being disloyal in saying that; it's just a fact. And
So glad to hear a Marine say that.
Well, it's just sheer numbers, and when you have
Right.
the Chinese with their numbers, the Marine Corps is speed bump. So it's just the reality. You have to understand that. But my point is that people are compensated much more now, and they get comfortable, and they have a house, especially in places, I'd say like Camp Lejeune, North Carolina at that time. People could afford a house. In California, if they could afford it, they're probably commuting over an hour away by car, twice a day. Some people stay at the barracks during the week, but anyway, there's when people are compensated the way they are, and then they can get the house, the couch, the wife, the kids, I think that makes a bit of a difference. And young guys get married too, young enlisted, but they just don't have the same resources. When officers are paid a lot more, I mean, I've never met an officer that didn't have a car. By the time they're out in the operational forces, they have a car, so they can meet not just one girl, they can meet many. They just have greater resources and opportunities. And I'm not being some punk and saying that; it's just a fact. When I was enlisted, I had to take a bus if I wanted to go out, and the bus stopped running at a certain time, so I couldn't just go bar hopping so easily. Plus, we didn't have the resources we weren't allowed to live off base until a certain rank, and you're walking around with this little bag they issued you in boot camp. They call it a war bag, and it's camouflage, and you just look like an idiot walking around. Like most girls know when they see you got a shaved head in this camouflage bag, like that's, and you don't know because you're just thrilled. But when you're a young Marine about being a Marine, you think it's the coolest thing in the world. And you think these girls are just prejudging you, like, yeah, because they can tell you don't have any money, you don't have a house, and they know what that drill is all about. So, but I think having that in mind, and I realized that, okay, some of these guys don't have all this opportunity, and a lot of these guys that are serving are from mid-America, and they really do love having camaraderie and close friends. And the officer, there was a big difference. I saw it between going to boot camp and then going to officer candidate school. In boot camp, it was about your platoon and your loyalty in that platoon. And as an officer, it was, you were evaluated as an officer candidate individually. It was not as a team. And I think some people, there is flaws in that, and I think that's what you see in this book, A Few Bad Men. And when it's taken to extreme, that, hey, this is about me as an individual versus me as a member of an organization. I just remember in boot camp, they would, they'd march our platoons into each other, and they would say, do not ever let somebody break your ranks. And they would intentionally march you into those platoons to demonstrate, their principle of unit integrity, and that you would fight bitterly. You just smash these guys if, they start integrating, but they're intentionally marching these platoons in there, for the rule of, to develop a cohesive unit. They didn't do that to us in officer candidate school. They didn't do that in the basic school. You were trained to fight as an individual, as a leader. And they always wanted to see you as a leader, and you competed against others to show your leadership. And there, I think, are problems when, people try to, accentuate that, without any type of, absolutes or regulations or guidance, or coach or supervision saying, hey, enough. And I know in the Marine Corps, they always talk about, leadership traits. They talk about mentoring, but unfortunately, mentoring, I'd say it probably hasn't changed too much. I just, started working at Tesla but 2 months ago, I was working as a civilian with the Marine Corps. I'd worked for 4 years, in the civilian capacity for the Department of Defense. Things really haven't changed. It's officers.
But don't you think those are just buzzwords? It's in law enforcement too. Those are buzzwords that they talk about because they want to breed a certain sense of thinking that things are done a certain way when in fact they're not. Those are buzzwords. Those get people excited about doing something.
Yes. Now, I will say there was mentoring as an officer, but it was very infrequent, and it took an extraordinary person. And I have those mentors. I have them right now. I actually went to an internment of a friend here just recently in California who had been a mentor, a Vietnam veteran, a sergeant, and then served over 2 decades with LAPD and on their SWAT team, just a hero. And, but, here's a Silver Star winner, 3 Purple Hearts, just an incredible man, raised an incredible family. There are those mentors, and I didn't just have them from, Vietnam era, but I had, when I got in the force recon community, I saw a lot of these enlisted. They would take the time because that was their life. Those NCOs, the non-commissioned officers, the sergeants, and then the staff non-commissioned officers, I'd see these staff sergeants, gunnery sergeants. They were so dedicated, so professional, and they would take the time and they would mentor, and they'd be there around the clock. You'd see the commitment that these guys, but the officers were nowhere to be seen, especially if an officer got in that community and they were married, direct conflict, because, in the reconnaissance community, we call it jack of all trades and master of none, because there's literally so many tasks that you have to, hopefully you don't have proficiency. You try to have mastery of these, but it is impossible. But in your striving to master them, well, that's going to cut into family time. And I mentioned that in the book about, these wives a couple times. When I was a platoon commander as a lieutenant, and we got called a month early to deploy because Saddam Hussein had pushed right up to the border of Kuwait. This was after Desert Storm, and so we left early, and I could just see that look on this wife of one of my sergeants' face, like, you bring him back home alive. And that's always stuck with me. But I would often see the commitment of my peers, many of which were not even married, but they were just like, hey, Southern California, when you're young, there's just so much to do, and you got to set your priorities. And I was glad I made those commitments uh, early and permanently in my career, that nothing will take a higher priority than the Marines and their training. And then when I got to the East Coast, again, where it's a little bit more, we'll say, affordable to live. They can have a house, and a lot of guys could afford a wife, and they had kids. And, it's almost like we had this rebellion going on. The wives came up, and that book, what is written in there is true. They came up to my senior enlisted advisor, and he, was these girls are having some kind of mutiny. They wanted more time. And, I overheard that, and, it's not like we're training them for bragging reasons. It's just, to me, that's the best chance to have a long-term life insurance policy that isn't paid in cash. It's paid in, a beating heart coming back to you in, the best likelihood. Because being in charge of training Tesla in North America, I see a direct correlation, I always have, between how you apply critical thinking and how you plan and how you develop and how you exercise training with enough repetitions to where ideally nothing exceptional happens. You're doing it the way it's supposed to be, and nobody's life is lost or seriously injured because you've done it the way that you're supposed to. And that's what I was trained in martial arts. That's what I went in on to play in organized sports as a youth. And I mentioned them in the acknowledgments in this book. Some of the coaches in my high school were father figures. I went to an all-boy Catholic school. The mentorship that they gave, I look back even frequently now, here in the past year, I've just been amazed at how, not just priests, we had priests that were, the Jesuit priests who were teachers, and some were also coaches, but we had, regular teachers who were not priests that got up in the morning. They were there at school at about 7:15. They'd work as a teacher all day. They would go and they'd coach a sport at night all throughout the year. And then they would develop lessons planned and teach us in the morning. I just look at that and think how dedicated they were. And these were family men. They had wives and kids. And I just look at the complete commitment of people like that. And that's who raised me. Going to Rockhurst High School.
But let me ask you something, because something really pops up in my mind. For the majority of your career, you would say you were single. You mention it in the book that you get rid of girls when you move somewhere else, when you go on deployment, whatever it may be. You get rid of whatever girl you're dating. The majority of the time, and I'm not saying that to make it sound bad. I'm saying all that to say this. When you say that, the commitment to these families and stuff, you always made sure, though, that there almost wasn't any attachments to you. And I'm trying to understand that. And I was trying to understand it when I read the book, because I feel like there's a dichotomy when you talk. There is this guy that wants these families and wants that. But then when the other thing comes up, training, deployments, things like that, that is what you focus on. So can you talk a little bit to that? Because I tried to figure it out the whole way through the book, because I'm like, well, he's saying two different things, but I think he's trying to say the same thing.
Yes. Well, I know in the Army they have, which I was in the Marines, but I worked with the Army. They have a character trait of a selfless service. And that's, like you said, with mentorship and other things, a lot of lip service paid to that. It's talked about often, but it's not often practiced effectively. So, but just like I mentioned in the book, when they were ordering me to go to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, this wasn't even a deployment. This was just moving from one coast of the U.S. in California to North Carolina. And I mentioned the girlfriend who I was dating at the time, Sugar Ray, and I was very attached to her. But it was a goodbye kiss, and we were in love. We talked about getting married. I just realized that I am not going to force her to move across the country when I am not going to completely commit to her. Um, because I realize in standing a unit up that's going to go to war, and the things that were in my head in 2006, when they were sending, there was a surge of American forces. Over 100,000 American service members were sent to Iraq. And there was a full page ad in the New York Times saying General Petraeus, because General Petraeus, who was a senior officer for the United States in Iraq, he requested this surge and he got it. And so this mass amount of military went in there. And I say that as background because it was a very bloody and unpopular demonstration on the television, the media. There was almost like information operations going on back at home, similar to what was going on in Vietnam, that this was very unpopular. And I was very well aware of that. I wasn't getting information singularly from the media. I would, every day after training, when we were back home, and usually these deployments, you're only home for maybe 5 months, but I was on, after the training was over, I'd be on a classified computer communicating to the platoon commanders, the officers who were over in Iraq, and getting information updates and studying about that. I remember my girlfriend and I, we used to love to work out, and the guys, we get back from training at 5 or 6, they go eat, and I'm going for probably about 3 hours of communication back and forth with leaders over in Iraq. So I'm getting that in my mind. A lot of people, they get over to Iraq and they do a 2-week turnover with the units that's there and the units that you're coming in with. I'm just stating fact. That didn't occur for me because that didn't really stop. In between the deployments, my mind was completely on the war. It was thinking what they're thinking, trying to continually sharpen it. And that again happened, from my sensei instilling that in my mind. Those coaches in high school talking about whether it's football or track or athletic conditioning, how you will do things to perfection, how you will give everything. That was programmed into my mind all throughout my youth. And I realized that, it probably was an advantage that certain things happened to me when I was young. Went to an all-boys school, high school. There was, at that time when normal people are dating, that there was just such a scarcity of women. I mean, you didn't see them at all. They weren't on the campus. And so I had this undivided attention. Same thing, my mom's example. She didn't say things to us. She just lived her life. She was a workaholic. And the lady next door, who was a war bride from Britain, married to our next door neighbor, she would do the cooking because my mom would work so late. She would usually come home like 7 o'clock and the kids needed to be fed. And, but my mom didn't say anything. She just showed it and proved what work was all about. And it's amazing to see how she is to this day. But that was ingrained into me like a brand. It didn't come verbally. It was something that was like burned into your mind that this is the way you do business. And I do believe, what happened and is recorded in that book was not accidental or coincidental. It was, just like the book, The Outliers, you do things enough that odds will be in your favor. Hard work does pay off. I wasn't born with a silver spoon and had all these resources and natural gifts and talents. To put it bluntly, I was the kid that I had to work a lot harder because I didn't have a dad to spend time playing baseball, basketball, football, or any of that. It was just something I really did enjoy, being outdoors and very athletic. And like I said, those kids in our neighborhood who also loved playing sports, they were older. And so you had to, you had to be able to defend yourself.
Well, let's talk about the actual story that's going on in this book, because we've kind of hit around it a lot, but I want to kind of set it up. I want to point out, before the ambush happened with you, there were 3 major incidents that happened: Fallujah, Haditha, and Hamandia. We'll go to Fallujah first. A lieutenant was left with some Iraqis that were taken into custody. He, for some reason, took their restraints off. He said that they were coming towards him, made him nervous, and both of them were killed when his company came back. He was eventually charged with war crimes on that, charged with murder. That's in April of 2004. Then Hamandia happens in 2005. Is that correct, or is that 2006? I think Haditha is 2005. Yeah, November 2005 is Haditha. That's a mass killing. Yeah, that's a mass killing. 4 Marines are charged with murder. Battalion commander, 3 officers are charged with murder. And then, of course, like I said, we have Hamandia, and that is Iraqi's man is grabbed from his home. He's thrown into a pit that a previous IED went off. There was a little cover-up going on. People were charged with war crimes on that. Now, I say all those things to say this. One, not the best scenario to go into when you've got this working against you. Definitely not the best. What I will say, though, I say all those things to say this. Not one of your guys from the MARSOC 7 was charged with a war crime. No. Things were brought up. The COI happened, but not one of them was charged with a war crime. And I say all that because these things, when they talked about them, there were clear things that happened in these that showed there was intention there. There was all these different kinds of things to prove what they were going. Then we get to yours, and this story plays out almost like a fiction story that it's made up, because it's so crazy how it happens and everything going to it. Now, I want you to set up the 4th of March, 2007, this complex ambush, and according to you, what happened that day?
Okay. Do you want me to go into the fine details or more?
Well, what I would like to do is kind of go the overview of it first, because I kind of want to set it up. I'm going to bring up that picture that we talked about. You just tell me when it's time to bring it up, and I'll bring it up. But I want you to do the overview, and then we'll get into the nitty-gritty of the crime scene and all that kind of stuff that was, by any means, even non-law enforcement looking into it, was crazy, from the interrogations to the crime scene to the recovery of evidence, all those different things. So let's set up the overview, and then let me know when you want to bring up the pictures.
Okay. So I'll bring it down to about 15,000 feet and get a little color in there. We were going on a mission on the 4th of March. We left at 6 o'clock in the morning. There was a 3-fold mission. And briefly, we were told to get up in the Tor Bora Mountains. These are snow-covered mountains, 14,000 feet elevation. That was the last place Osama bin Laden was spotted. We thought, oh man, when we first got there, this is going to be great. Last place Osama bin Laden. So we continued to request helicopters. We were very anxious and bullish, trying to get up in those mountains. But the boss who I worked for, Colonel Haas, Army Green Beret, put this restraint, which was smart. He said, hey, I can't have another Operation Red Wings. You must have a quick reaction force being able to immediately reinforce if you get any contact. Okay, that's smart. I understand why. And so we requested to get up into those mountains with helicopters and then have a quick reaction force be able to flown in there with helicopters. Everybody who's ever seen or read the book Lone Survivor saw, Navy SEALs. This was in 2005. They were inserted in helicopters. They had a quick reaction force that had helicopters to support them. The main difference is we were there in Jalalabad, right where the helicopters were. The helicopters were sitting there doing nothing for day after day, week after week. And so anyway, it kind of was like a catch-22. Hey, get up in the mountains, but we're not going to give you the support that you're required to have in order to do that. So this mission, one, we were attempting to go to this area where we could stage a quick reaction force right on the Afghan-Pakistan border. They had an army base that was there, and we were like, hey, we could stage vehicles here, and we could at least insert a patrol or some recon teams in the foothills and start looking around like we were required to do. We were trying to do the mission as best we could with restriction. They didn't give us any of the resources. So we went there to do the first of the 3 things we were doing that day was a face-to-face coordination with the Army officer in charge of that base to make sure she would allow us to have a dedicated quick reaction force there. That was no problem. The second thing we were doing is to do a visual reconnaissance right after that coordination of that area in the foothills, so that before we committed to it, I wanted myself and our Marines to visually see where we were going to go and how that terrain, how formidable it was. This is the Khyber Pass, very steep, some of the most challenging terrain on the planet. And we did need to do a daylight visual reconnaissance. The third mission that we were doing that morning was to meet the tribal leaders in this village. And this was a big change, DJ, from Iraq. If we had information and intelligence that was good intelligence, we could go and prosecute a target, meaning we could go capture or kill somebody that we knew was an outlaw. The thing that had changed in 2006, in October 2006, we changed from the U.S. rules of engagement to the NATO rules of engagement in Afghanistan. And that was the start of the forever war. So prior to that, Afghanistan was kind of a sleepy hollow. But I think there was people in the Pentagon and right across the street from the Pentagon, when you fly into D.C., whether it's Dulles or Reagan National Airport, and you see the names on the tops of those buildings, Raytheon, Lockheed, Boeing, General Dynamics, those people love war because they benefit from it financially like you've never seen. DJ, you and I, we don't even have friends that get picked up in Lear jets and flown in there. And, that's their little access ticket. You need a badge to get in the Pentagon. So you have to show that badge, unless, guess what? I just left the military. Unless that's right, a retired 4-star general. Then you just go waltzing in, literally. VIP, the only ones that get automatic exemption, retired 4-star general. So they just go waltzing in.
Why do you think that is?
Well, it's a racket. So back in World War I, World War II, they didn't have the security that we have after 9/11. Now you can't get in there. So everybody knows, and Smedley Butler, one of the most famous Marine Corps generals, wrote this book after World War I called War is a Racket. And he said, hey, we're going to go to war with the Japanese. We're going to go to war with Adolf Hitler. He's like, you just mark my words. And I'll say it on the record right now. We will be at war. We're going to get drawn into this war. Although the treaty has expired to defend Taiwan, I ask all your listeners, research it, look it up. That's expired. But every member of Congress and all these retired generals that are on these boards, this is the No General Left Behind program. All these guys get out and they get on these boards and they make money hand over fist because they're needed. They're needed to go in there and influence and persuade people. And they don't want straight shooters to be promoted in this system. They want the jellyfish leaders, the ones that will buckle every time. And that's who we promote in the military right now. Why do you think we're having such a problem with retention and recruitment? Is because people know, like, the military is not what it used to be. And these leaders are just out for themselves. And that's how you get promoted. How do you get promoted? You read our book, A Few Bad Men. You see these guys, how they got promoted is they chuck somebody under the bus to take the heat and the blame off them. Anybody that's been in corporate world sees the same thing that's happened there too. If you're getting some heat on you, grab somebody, chuck them under the bus. The person that's the busiest and that's doing the most work, you finally find something that's, where somebody's, doesn't like that, and they're going to like find some reason to make it look like whatever he's or she's doing is crazy or ridiculous, and start getting sentiment going the wrong way towards them, and that person becomes an easy target. The person that's doing things the best they can. Unfortunately, that's the state of our U.S. military right now. If anyone says different and they're in the military, you need to take a good, honest look, long and wide across the whole entire organization, and be honest with yourself. But anyway,
I asked that because I think those generals that you're talking about, not necessarily they were generals at the time, but there were some people that were definitely shooting for those stars. That's the reason I ask you that. When you say that Afghanistan was a sleepy hollow, but there were some people at the Pentagon that wanted stuff done, what exactly was it that they wanted done?
Well, when you devise these rules of engagement with the hamstring the frontline foot soldiers, and they give the advantage. This. So at that time, let me explain to you what General Petraeus did. He got he left Afghanistan or left Iraq and went back to near my hometown in eastern Kansas, Fort Leavenworth, and he was a 3-star there. Developed the doctrine of counterinsurgency. He sent it over to the Marine Corps. Marine Corps general at Marine Corps Combat Development Command in Quantico, Virginia at the time was none other than General Jim Mattis. So this Hearts and Minds campaign of counterinsurgency, and everybody has this admiration and love for General Mattis. I'm not saying he didn't do many things good, but I'm saying this counterinsurgency strategy. So you think General Mattis right now would send his new bride to a bed and breakfast in Bagram? DJ, you got to be on coke, dope, or dog food to believe in that. That's garbage. No. But he pushed this thing for over 20 years. This Hearts and Minds. General Mattis took it one step further, and there's no original idea with that guy. He hijacked the Hippocratic Oath and said, we're going to have this slogan in the Marines of first do no harm. So let's calibrate our gauges here. Remember this guy, Mr. Pearl, a reporter that got his head cut off over in Afghanistan right at the start of the war, and why media wouldn't even send reporters over there unless they were completely embedded with American patrols? I mean, that's costing news agencies a lot of money. So that's one thing that impacted, and I'll get to that here in a second, why they started hiring these native Afghans to be stringers and to be, if you're some news source and you're living in a Taliban-controlled village right on the Afghan-Pakistan border, so guess what? We can't go into Pakistan unless you're like SEAL Team 6. So if you're not going, and that's like a training sanctuary. And what do you think is right on the other side of the border of Afghanistan? Well, that's your logistics node. Think of Amazon Fulfillment Center. That's where these fully radicalized fighters come in, and they link up with their handlers to get their jihad on and kill the infidels in Kandahar and Kabul and Sangin and all across. So the third mission that we were on the morning of 4 March was to, and we had to play by these goofy rules of engagement. Again, a year prior in Iraq, we would just go and roll people up. 2007, we had to do this first do no harm. You had to have like a federal case against somebody. So you have to go in there. We knew where there's 4 fully radicalized suicide bombers. We even knew the house they were in. You have to go in there and try to suss these guys out and meet with the tribal elders and sit around and waste a lot of time, possibly get people killed. And when we went into that town, as we approached, the pattern of life had changed completely from 3 hours prior when we went through there, where it was hustle and bustle, normal pattern of life, atmospherics, women and children in the marketplace. This 180 degrees out. Nothing but fighting age men lined up on the side of the road like it's a parade. We go in there, we realize, okay, now we're in the throat of this. We can't turn around. These guys want to fight us. Car bomb goes off. Boom! Burns the trees over 100 feet in the air. Immediately after that, it went off right on the bumper of our second Humvee, which was our ambulance vehicle. Then another sports utility vehicle, a Toyota Prado. That was a picture given by a non-government organization and worker during the court of inquiry of the actual car bomb at 9 o'clock in the morning on the 4th of March.
So is that the biggest car bomb you'd ever seen?
By far,
okay.
Even to this day. So this car bomb was constructed mainly of fuel and mortar rounds to blast shrapnel 360 degrees. And that was intended to wound and horrifically. So when somebody gets burned like that, and I was describing earlier, that is such a psychological devastation of what is, people remember that and they become less willing to fight, and they just don't want to fight or have to do it very often. But this picture is of the actual ambush zone. As you see on the south side of that one road, that there's a road that goes east-west or from the right to the left. That is the road, and you see what looks like a little dry riverbed to the south. That is a riverbed that goes over the Spin Pool Bridge So you see right there, but just to the right of that, about half an inch across, you see the this little unimproved trail that a sports utility vehicle, a Toyota Prado, came driving at our second vehicle that just got hit. We pulled over and we were stationary in what we call a herringbone formation. So the vehicle's kind of spread out. That's the tactics we use. And so this sports utility vehicle had a driver and 3 other passengers. The 3 passengers were hanging out of the windows, firing their AK-47s fully automatic at our second vehicle. Our vehicles we stopped, we thought that second vehicle that got blown up, we thought that there was nobody that could survive that. Immediately, the turret gunner, who was knocked down from that blast, had some shrapnel in his right bicep. He stood to his feet, extinguished the flames that were on his chest, and aimed in his medium machine gun and just devastated that Toyota Prado, just aiming and firing fully automatic, that belt-fed weapon. That vehicle, as I mentioned, of ours, a Humvee, was an ambulance. Marine from the rear troop compartment stood, and that was the only ambulance we had. The rest of the 5 vehicles were fully encased, so that vehicle looked much different. It looked like it was less armored, and it was. And so they knew exactly what they were doing, and they attempted to finish that off after they hit it with a car bomb. But the 2 commandos in the vehicle, one stood in the turret, one stood in the rear troop compartment with a light machine gun, which is a belt-fed weapon, and they just emptied right into that vehicle, killing the 3 passengers that were firing AK-47s at us. The driver of that vehicle, unfortunately, survived and rolled into a ditch and continued to fight against us through the remainder of that engagement. But we stayed stationary on that road for about 5 minutes. As soon as that vehicle was destroyed, we received fire on the north side of the road, up in that dry riverbed. So we made quick work. Vehicles 1 and 2, they aimed in and shot at the personnel that were dismounted, and they were moving. They were advancing at us, where one element would provide suppressive fire and the other would have dismounted maneuver, where they were advancing towards us. But you see that road there, DJ, that's a little bit higher elevation. And when you're standing in a turret, people are over 6 foot tall. You're executing that military axiom of take the high ground, maintain fire superiority. So it was very quick work that was made out of those jihadists in the dry riverbed. So people, if you look at this picture really good, some people say, oh, some civilians were killed in the crossfire. Where that spin pool road hits the perpendicular, our Marines fired right down that road. That wasn't some heavily trafficked road. And just vehicle 2 aimed in and shot that vehicle that was shooting at us. So there weren't civilians running all over and around in that area, nor were there from what vehicles 1 and 2 shot in that dry riverbed on the north side, or the upper portion of that picture in the dry riverbed. So if you've ever been in a dry riverbed, it's not a congregation of many people that just hanging out for no reason. They're generally in there for some form or fashion. And as the lady that took that picture in the previous shot showed the vehicle, the bomb that blew up, she testified in the courtroom that she had workers on the south side of that road. This was a non-governmental worker from Europe. She said she had workers in that dry riverbed to the south that were armed, even though the testimony of the Taliban and that testified in the court said, no, nobody has any weapons. There's no need to have weapons. And as she stated that, she heard different caliber of gunfire going on, not just like fully automatic gunfire from our belt-fed weapons, but she heard, single shots. But she didn't say she saw all these people killed, but, we did kill people that day who were shooting at us, but she didn't see the hysteria and the ridiculous accusations that the Afghans in that Afghan village, who were paid the equivalent of 4 years' salary for anyone that, filled out a claim with no proof. I mean, I don't know about you, DJ, but if they're if you just showed up at City Hall without any proof, there'd probably be more than 19 people that would fill out a claim if you get 4 years average salary of an American. Uh, but they were just starting giving money away. That was part of this Hearts and Minds campaign. I mean, isn't that an incentive to, I mean, on both ends, the generals are getting rich, the warlords are getting rich.
We're talking about the Saladia list.
Yeah, salacia payments. So
Yeah,
they
yeah.
give the salacia payments because it sounds nice. This cool thing. We're sorry. They put their hands on their heart like General Nicholson does. The picture of him in the book. This is the Afghan apology. I'm sorry. I'll give you this salacia payment. I mean, come on. That's why the number went up to 669. They said the final number was 19 killed and 50 wounded. You've been
Now
in law enforcement.
you should point out though that changed about 4 times. The number changed.
That's what I was going to talk about exactly.
Okay.
Because you've been in law enforcement, and you have any investigation, you couldn't anywhere near accurately find out how many people died at all. And you had both the Afghan National Police and the Afghan National Army arrive on scene with a U.S. Army military police platoon arrived on scene within 50 minutes, 15. So all these agencies were there, and the reports were 8, then 10, then 12. You go back and you read between what the Afghans wrote in their investigations and what different Western media sources. Now, are you really going to believe when it was originally 8 and then it's all these numbers and there's 19 and then there's no prima facie evidence? There's no body, bullet, but you're going to believe just whatever when there's incentives with compensation. I mean, most American businesses, if you said, hey, just fill out this form, there's no proof required, and we'll give you your 4-year salary right now, probably be quite a few Americans that would be saying, sounds good. And then
Absolutely.
in the back, at the back of the book, A Few Bad Men, there's an appendix that just lists what NCIS, they interviewed all these witnesses, all these Afghans, so many of them. Just read it. This was from the NCIS. And so there's some things growing up that talk about my life story, but then you get in the trial, and that is, when you see all these quotes, that is sworn testimony from the courtroom, much of which was...
And we're going to get into that because there is some crazy stuff that comes out in court. Before we get to that, though, I want to get back because you mentioned him particularly, the driver of the vehicle, who never drove a vehicle until that day when he was going to the market to pick up fertilizer.
Yeah. And he not only had fertilizer, he said he just spent a lot of his money on gasoline, like massive quantities of gasoline. So if listeners don't understand, when you have somebody that's a village elder, is buying massive amounts of fertilizer and gasoline, and somebody can't connect the dots, and you're a naval criminal investigator, and you just think you buy his word at face value that he says there's no Taliban in this village. Hello, this is the only paved road in Afghanistan in 2007, and it connects the capital cities of Afghanistan and Pakistan. So what do you think is right on the other side of the border in Afghanistan? It's going to be their fulfillment center. Just think Amazon. And so they just, all these guys would go in there. In the back of the book, A Few Bad Men, read the appendice about the Afghans' testimony. All these guys would say, well, my village elder told me I could come here and get a payment. And when they said, no, we're just here to take the statement, they're like, oh, well, I don't have anything to say, but my village elder just told me to come in here and get payment. You read that again and again and again and again, and then you start to see, like, who had this information? The convening authority did, General Mattis. But what else did he have? He had the testimony of 30 personnel who were on that patrol, to include an Afghan interpreter. Conveniently, the Afghan interpreter's statement was omitted by the Air Force investigating officer, along with the statements of the Army EOD specialist from the Task Force Paladin that looked at our vehicles and said, hey, these were hit by projectiles from bullets. And but they had all that. They had my testimony and my polygraph taken by Terrence Victor O'Malley, God rest his soul, who was at that time the president of the American Polygraph Association. So, I mean, they knew what the truth was and they knew what the truth wasn't, but
So
they had
let,
already rushed to judgment and allowed us to get kicked out. And that's what these investigations started turning into investigations going wild.
Okay, so there's a lot of things that come up there that I want to talk about. Big things. Commandant is the name of the driver, correct? I think I'm saying his name
Haji
right.
Lawani Commandant, the
Yeah,
crazy
Commandant.
commander, translates.
So let's talk about a couple of the things that he said. First, he said he received injuries, but he could never prove that he had injuries. And when he finally did show some injuries, they were old scars, they said.
Yes. But he got paid, and he demanded in the trial, and he demanded to NCS that he wanted justice and
500,000.
compensation. Yeah.
And 500,000 more Afghanis that he said was in the glove compartment of the car that he said probably got destroyed. Another thing that he said, though, was this was the interesting part to me. He gave 2 different times of how many people were in the vehicle with him.
Yeah. So here's the tribal elder that, the government's team was sitting there as a lead witness, thanking him afterwards, and didn't even really pull that thread back at all. This shows like the court of inquiry, this trial that we went to is supposed to be a fact-finding panel. It is supposed to, by legal definition, be fair, impartial, and unbiased. It was everything but. It was adversarial. The lawyers, they were called prosecutors, and that's what they were there to do. So it wasn't this impartial, there was extreme prejudice going on. They were trying to back up the general who made that decision, and the convening authority wanted a conviction. But when we get back to that, yes, Haji Lawani Commandant translates literally to the crazy commander. So he's televised, live, and we had information. I can't get into all the details of that, but we had information that he was leading training over on the Pakistan side a few days before of up to 100 personnel formations that were targeting Americans in that village. That was in a little binder that was presented to all the members of the panel. And so the government prosecution knew that. They just didn't want to talk about any of that information whatsoever. But that was the caliber of information that is the gold standard. There was no doubt about who this guy was. It was known to the court. They brought him onto an American base after they paid him. The Army Battle Space Commander, the conventional colonel, John Nicholson at that time, said, "Oh, we scrubbed the list of everybody that was paid. Come on. I know you're going to get up there and say whatever you need to say to save your hide, but that guy should have been charged for multiple offenses of lying and dereliction of duty." But Haji Lawani Commandant gave his number out. They should have ran that. I mean, the dude is a straight up terrorist, and brought onto the base, testified against us, said he was shot, said a year before to NCIS in May of 2007 that there was 3 people that were killed. He was paid for 3 people that were killed. In the court, he swore on the Quran, swore to Allah, everything he said would be 100% true. These are his own. When I'm saying the book is not my word, once you go in the courtroom, those were Haji Lawani Commandant. That's his real name. Those were his own words. And then he says that there was 2 people. So if you can't remember, you say to NCIS, these were your family members, and you were compensated for it, and then you can't remember less than a year later in January 2008 that you had how many people in the car that were killed, and that you said, the tribal leaders said that we were drunk, and that the Marines wanted to make it seem like there was a car bomb, so we used slingshots with grenades and fired them, and then we, after a car bomb, that we were dumb enough to dismount from our armored vehicles and go door to door shooting people. That's what the tribal leaders said. And this is a fact, DJ. When we were kicked out, and right before I was relieved, my battalion commander came out to Kuwait, where we were sent to. He came out from Camp Lejeune, North Carolina. And this knucklehead, who's supposed to be our commanding officer and believe, at least some form of trust in his own Marines, said, "Is it true? Is it true that you guys were drunk? So at first, no evidence, anything. You just believe the hearsay of these Afghan locals in this Taliban-controlled village. Uh, we don't need not one leader in the United States military that thinks like that. If you completely disregard and distrust your own Marines, you had 2 commissioned infantry officers on that patrol who at that time had the most combat experience. The other officer on the patrol,
Captain
as you
East.
read in the book, was shot in the thigh during the Battle of Fallujah with a 12.7 millimeter heavy Soviet-made machine gun. Nearly died, nearly had his leg amputated. These weren't fresh-faced recruits. These were warriors, real warriors. And then you have these perfumed princesses, just questioning everything. Politicians in uniform. That's Is there any really question as to why we didn't win that war and why we? I almost want to use the word that we left. We retreated last August. Almost a year ago, we retreated in shame, and nobody accepted any accountability of that. And now we wonder why the retention rate and recruitment rates suck. Don't wonder why. The truth is hidden right in front of our face. It's all these facts. Uh, I know there's some people that say, well, there's some idiots out there in the internets. I've heard them. It blows me away. And God bless, in America, we have freedom of speech. But there are some people that are in such denial. This has been taken. I went to the longest trial in Marine Corps history, and without spoiling it for everybody, then they sent me to another trial where I addressed all the same matter again. This was from a subsequent deployment to Afghanistan.
We're gonna get into that one too. The BOI that you're talking about.
Correct. And then the Department of the Navy came out in 2019 in explicit detail in a 12-page report using very explicit language, like that original investigation from Colonel Bahana, the Air Force colonel. That doesn't make any sense to have an Air Force colonel, with no combat experience doing the investigation. By the way, he did a similar investigation 6 months prior against ODA 374, which was an Army Green Beret team. Yeah, and he found that these guys who were out on an approved capture kill mission took one shot after they positively ID'd a terrorist, shot the terrorist in the forehead, killed him with one round. They charged both Captain Dave Stafel and Master Sergeant Troy Anderson with homicide. The recommendation was from Colonel Pat Bahana. It's kind of like the mob. When you want something done, you send your henchman. The guy that knows how to handle a bat has no morals whatsoever. I mean, the 12-page report from the Department of Navy in 2019 explicitly says verbiage that's so strong. My attorney is like, he's never seen anything like this in practicing law for 40 years. The verbiage regarding Colonel John Nicholson, then Colonel John Nicholson, and Colonel Pat Bahana. I mean, these Marines, one's a soldier, one's Air Force, they need to be charged. Read the book, and you see, like, everybody that reads it, from members of the media, members of Congress, movie producers, they're all like, how did they get away with this? And that is the number one thing in America. When you get rid of all the entitlements, welfare, and all this stuff, the non-discretionary spending that we have to spend our money on, this is the most expensive thing. So if the most expensive thing you spend, DJ, is your house, and it's just falling apart and it's not working for you, but it's under warranty, you sure as hell would want to make sure it gets fixed and demand that somebody come out. But we're not. We're just worried about the stock market dropping today or all these other things. What's going on with Elon? What's going on with, the next Harry Potter movie, all these ridiculous distractions. But we, as Americans, will be at war with the People's Republic of China. We are going to lose tens of thousands of Americans in a bloody war that will get launched. Because why? Because these defense contracting firms want a war. These generals have all mortgaged their souls, and they are working for these companies. Check it out. Look who's on the board's directors. Look where General Mattis went straight back to General Dynamics. He came from General Dynamics. Look at the current Secretary of Defense. Came from Raytheon. Look at the last chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff, went straight to Lockheed Martin. Prove me a liar. I wish you would, because I wish this wouldn't happen. But we are going to go to war with China, and it's not going to be with guys that are using weapons made 2 years after World War II, like we were fighting for the last 20 years. It's going to be people with aircraft carriers, fifth generation fighters, swarms of drones, and they're going to slaughter a lot of Americans. And there's people in Washington, D.C., and these retired generals that want that to happen so badly. So wake up, America.
Let me ask you something then. And this, I thought it through the whole book. All of this that you say is going to come true, okay? That we go to war, that they're, I'm trying to understand with that, the thing that happened to you happened a lot, you would agree. Maybe not necessarily to the level or whatever, but roadside bombs, ambushes, complex ambushes, those happen frequently in Afghanistan and Iraq. You would agree, right?
All the time. Yes, daily.
So I'm trying to figure out, and I tried to figure out through the whole book, why this narrative was pushed the whole time that there was something so bad. I understand we set this up with saying those 3 incidents happened before. Why was it so important to this one? Because we haven't even got into March 9th.
Yeah.
Was it March 9th that another patrol went out? I'm just trying to figure out why it was so important that this one went down the way it did.
Very, very good question. And so we have a situation that, and it does require us to kind of backtrack a little bit. And I'll give the 15,000 foot, not nape of the earth and not 30,000 foot. But so the Marines have always felt, especially in comparison to the Army, that we're better trained and we have this high esprit de corps just because we're, fierce fighters. And I'll go kind of far back real quickly. The Marines were formed in a bar in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania, where the owner of that bar, Samuel Nicholas, was, the owner, and he was giving these guys so much rum, he's convincing them to, fight the most powerful nation on the earth. And these, warriors went out to sea on these ships and fought on land. And sometimes throughout American Marine Corps history, we pulled to the side another ship, a man of war as they called, swung across on ropes and started jabbing people with daggers and swords. And I mean, Marines have distinguished themselves and acquitted themselves in battles for more of American history, more years of American history than we have not fought. So like a situation like this where we're in is very unusual, where we're not fighting. I know we're fighting in certain parts of the world right now, but my point is, we've always thought we were better. To have an elite within elite has been hated. Winston Churchill did this in England, where he created from the British Royal Marines a commando unit. Then they went to war behind German lines and wreaked havoc. Roosevelt wanted the same thing, FDR. He ordered the Marines to create a commando unit, and they didn't want it. He even wanted them to be called commandos, and the Marines said, we'll call them the Raiders. They were formed in February 1942. They fought for 2 years in the South Pacific. They were organized for 2 years. They fought for a little bit less. And while they were still fighting in the South Pacific, in tough engagements such as Guadalcanal and many other places, they were disbanded in February of 1944. With stroke of pen by the commandant at the time, General Vandergrift, said this is not in the best interest of the Marine Corps to have an elite within elite. Got rid of them. Let's fast forward to another data point. 1987, the United States forms up the Special Operations Command. All the Green Berets, Rangers, SEALs, Air Force, they all combined in there. Marines did not contribute a soul to the Special Operations Command in 1987. Second data point, they believed every Marine is special. So what we have going on is, third data point, 9/11 happens. Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld orders we will have increased capacity for all special operations inside every service. SEAL Team 7 and SEAL Team 8 form, one on each coast. Every Green Beret Special Forces group adds a battalion per Special Forces group. What do the Marines do? Abstain. They say, well, we'll appease them by sending a couple liaison officers down to Tampa, the Special Operations Command. That's how we'll meet this requirement. Rumsfeld gets a little more agitated. A couple years go by. In 2003, they form a proof of concept. We're going to have 86 guys try to see if the Marines can even compete with the Navy SEALs and the Green Berets. We don't know. We need to find if this can even happen, because we really don't know if we're good enough or we can integrate the way they do. Meanwhile, we've been fighting wars. We've had our own elite called Force Reconnaissance, but the Marine Corps didn't want to have to pay the bar tab and watch some other person, even your best buddy, sit there and drink it. They don't like this Special Operations Command where you pay the bill and your elite units that you're paying for all this special training and equipment, they go and they support the Army or the Navy. They didn't want any part of that. It didn't make logical sense because the Marine Corps has the smallest budget. And why give up all your, elite units to work for somebody else and leave you empty-handed? It makes business sense, but it was not what the Secretary of Defense wanted. So November 2005 comes along, and Rumsfeld, here's the Marine Corps was hedging their bets, saying, well, Bush 43 could end up being a one-term president like his father, George Sr. And guess what? Number 43 got reelected and kept Rumsfeld on as Secretary of Defense. So what does Rumsfeld do? Marine Corps, you shall, just like Moses walking down, written in the hand of God, with the two tablets, thou shall have a Marine Special Operations Command in the U.S. Special Operations Command. So it's official, it's happening. They pulled me off the West Coast, and they made me the first commanding officer of a Marine Special Operations Company. I was there on the activation day on February 24th, 2006 in Camp Lejeune, where the Godfather himself, Secretary of Defense Donald Rumsfeld, officiated this arranged marriage between the Special Operations Command, at that time commanded by General Brown, and the Commandant of the Marine Corps, General Hagee, who was there, and we were their first love child. So they were just hoping that this love child would die on the operating table. Maybe something would happen. And I was even told and the Pentagon didn't want me to use the name of this agency, but you probably figured out. So this retired Force Recon Marine that I had served with when he was a staff sergeant, and we served together in Force Recon, he retired, and he was working over there for an organization where he was allowed to grow a beard in Afghanistan. And he said, Fred, they don't know who I am. I just go to all these meetings inside the Green Beret headquarters, and I've just heard them openly talking about the first chance they have, they're going to get you guys kicked out of here. That's what I heard from my good friend. I won't say his name, but the very first day we arrived in Afghanistan. So I completely was naive, and I dismissed it, DJ. I thought I couldn't believe that, we've been fighting wars for a couple of years at this point. This was 2007. The war in Afghanistan started in 2001. I was like, I just couldn't believe that somebody would betray and whatever. I just literally wanted to start doing our job, our mission. And but lo and behold, what he said was 100% true, and it came to fruition. Actually, the first chance that something came up that was questionable, and that's just what they were waiting for. Just like the late Congressman Walter Jones accurately said, that these Army officers, they were just waiting. They couldn't wait to throw us under the bus. And that's exactly true. God rest his soul.
Okay, so that happens. You explain why this one was so important. March 9th happens. They're saying certain people can go out of the wire, but certain can't. So this is Captain East, correct? That's going to take a unit out.
Correct.
Okay.
Well, actually, he was the platoon commander, but he was on the patrol on 4th of March, so he couldn't go out himself. He sent one of his teams out.
Okay, so let me get to that, because that was a little confusing to me.
Yes.
With this Captain East, I want to go back to something that you said when you went to officer candidacy school. You said that it's about yourself. It's about not the unit. It's about yourself. I very much picked up on that about this one. And if I understand it right, he had not only done the mission that you said was going to happen, but he also planned another route and another mission without your knowledge. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. So my question to that is with everything that's happening, because shit is rolling downhill on you guys at a rapid pace.
Yes.
Why would someone take the risk of bringing even more shit down on top of you by not clearing that? They already know if something goes wrong, which tons of stuff went wrong on this mission. It was a comedy of errors.
Yes.
Why would they? I don't understand with you, and you speak highly of him at different parts of the book. Why would he do that to you, and why would he do that to this small unit?
Okay. There's a couple reasons. It's not as simple, but I will explain, my thoughts on this. So, when you're the commanding officer of an organization, and I will say, akin to like General Custer walking into the Battle of Little Bighorn, you're not around friendlies. These Army special operators and the Army conventional operators, these are not friends of Fred. These are people that want to take us out. So they're not coordinating or having any contact whatsoever with Captain East. None whatsoever. So his mind, he's getting it from me because he came and asked me, and I mentioned in the book, came to ask me, can we do anything else? 3 times. And it was very clear each time, no, 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 no. So where were these guys planning this mission? They were planning it in our operations center, which is where I even had a fold out little rack. I slept there. So, some people in the court of inquiry like, well, he wasn't there at a confirmation brief. It's because we planned this mission with them. But if somebody decides like, hey, I'm going to zig where I told him I'll zag and he won't know any different, that, better to ask for forgiveness than ask for permission. But let me also so he didn't understand all the heat that, I'm getting shelled. So all this heat's coming down on me. And as an officer, I'm trained by good officers that I respected, not necessarily an officer candidate school, but when I would hit the operational forces and I was, a platoon commander, I had a commanding officer Colonel Jeff Powers, just a warrior's warrior, told me and showed me, more importantly, that the role of an officer is to absorb the heat, the pain. You are the one that stands up. And I saw him for years. When we'd have some time off, I'd see him go, we're done training. I'd see him put his service uniform on and go testify for a character witness for some Marines that have been accused for one thing or the next. I'm seeing a lieutenant colonel and then got promoted to colonel do this again and again. I saw him do that multiple times, where I didn't see a lot of other officers absorb that pain for their guys. So, but that was ingrained into my mind by that leader and a mentor. To this day, Colonel Jeff Powers is still a huge mentor to me, as well as one of these warriors that was an intern this week. Was another warrior, different time frame. But these men had something in common, and that was they stood up for their own guys. They would take it themselves. So I'm absorbing the pain. I'm the one communicating, but I'm also communicating to my guys, no, we can't do this. But here's the second portion of this. And I'm not saying this to diminish anything about any of the leaders or Marines in our unit. But I've been to combat multiple times to that point, and I understand the mindset of what some of these enemy leaders are doing. I can't get into all of the classified types of intelligence, but they understand some of our capabilities that we had there with our Marine Special Operations Task Force. So they were planning and saying things that we could understand, that they're trying to gauge our reaction. But we did uncover that they had a plan to run 2 separate vehicle suicide bombs into the front gate where we were at, and then do a massive assault supported by indirect fire. So mortars dropping shrapnel all around us. So it was not this abandonment of like, hey, but I also understood that this has happened before. And when you're kind of alone at Fort Apache on the outskirts, some guys get psyched out by that. And, it's not like I was just sitting there like, easy day, let's take a relax here. I knew that this could likely happen. And if it did, we would have to fight. And it would be a ugly, unfair fight, but we're going to slug it out. But it's also probably less likely to happen. And it didn't. But that was in the mindset of this captain, as well as our intelligence officer, who the intelligence officer, I believe, had different motives. I believe he wanted to be the next platoon commander to replace on the next deployment. And he wanted to pull the rabbit out of the hat and go for the big win. And, hey, you couldn't do this, but we did it anyway. And, we saved the day. Look what we did. So I can't get into the specifics of what their actual mission was or what they were trying to do, because that is still the years that will take to be unclassified. I can't get into what they were doing, but I will say that the route they took was not a route that I had approved. And I gave specific guidance not to go anywhere besides from our one base to the other base. And yes, it was very disappointing that was violated. And then we did have other missions going on that night, which the two other missions also had events happen that escalated to, we're doing what we're supposed to do. We're telegraphing the information. Hey, this is what's going on. But these three missions that went immediately sequential, one after the other, boom, boom, boom. And that's how we'd been trained up to that point, is we're used to doing simultaneous and sequential execution of multiple missions. And just like with a lot of aviation mishaps, usually mishaps come in threes. And the night of the 9th of March was no exception. It was a night that I was very disappointed and, mentally, emotionally, psychologically, it was a very, very low point for me to have, your own guys do things that were, you just couldn't expect that they would do that, because these guys were literally like younger brothers to me. As in, I've spent so much time, we'd been organized for over a year, and I just, again, maybe it's some of my upbringing. I realize sometimes I can be loyal to a fault and be stupid in just my trust. And that's happened in relationships. You read this book, and this is a nonfiction book, about like dating and marriage. And sometimes I'm like a dog, and I just don't learn that, somebody can be cruel, thoughtless, and kick you, and other people can do some other stupid and things. And when you give somebody your trust, and it hurts. So yeah,
well, I want to ask you though, Fred,
and dating life out.
Yeah, we'll get to that. Trust me. Here's the thing though. And it bothered me during the whole thing. You say disappointed. You say these nice words about it. You had to be pissed off. This was the straw that broke the camel's back. This is what got you kicked out of Afghanistan. You agree, correct?
100%. And
so I don't understand. I don't understand how you can walk away and it's a question to you and just say, I was disappointed. I was drained. Yeah. You were pissed.
Oh yeah. And as I mentioned in the book, I usually maintain my composure.
Right.
At that time, I'd been in the Marine Corps in 2007 for just shy of 20, like a couple months shy. I came in the Marines in June of 1987. So this happened in March of 2007. So it's not like I was a young guy, but I did lose control of my emotions, and I went off on him, and I mentioned that in the book that, it was so infuriating and disappointing. Like I I don't usually use foul language in front of my Marines, especially where I'm losing my temper and in anger. Uh, and this individual and I are still friends, and he's moved on and proven himself, and just he really is the man that I knew he was. He just screwed up, and he screwed up in a big way, and I let him know, um, and that probably crushed his soul to know that he completely betrayed me, and you know we've talked about this. We've spent time together, and I know he and I have both moved on in our lives and our careers, and things have changed. But I know that still is something that we both realize is just wish it wouldn't have happened ever. And you look back and sometimes, but one thing I will say about that is uh, I want to say two things if I could. So
Absolutely.
no matter what you do, and I say this, I wasn't the guy that was over there doing the physical fitness like a lot of these special operators. I will say this, and I'm not the guy that like, oh well, I was doing all this and that. I was awake, 20 hours a day. I was not just awake. 20 hours a day, I had a uniform on my back, not spending time in the chow hall and fun and games and calling your girlfriend or anything, working 20 hours a day. And you can work as much as you want, but nobody is omnipotent. Nobody can uh, go and know everything. And if somebody wants to change, and you see this in aviation, and you see this especially in reconnaissance and special operations units, they, to a degree, people have to have uh, decentralization. They have to have some leeway to maneuver. But what he had done went beyond that. It was like intentional. Like, hey, I'm gonna even say to my boss, he was like my big brother, and I know he looked up to me, and I looked at him with a lot of respect. He was a guy who almost lost his life and recovered back, and he literally epitomized like Rocky Balboa, uh, not flawless, but just somebody with just heart that you couldn't even measure, and but deeply, deeply disappointed. And some people say like, but you also have to understand like this was a family to me, and but it cut down to my soul. Like that really hurt because now, Marines at that time we still we came from the reconnaissance community. We have a reconnaissance creed. There's in that reconnaissance creed, the verbiage that's used is we don't fail. And here I see, okay, this decision that a young Marine officer made was a bad, like the worst decision you can make, and it's causing us to fail. Uh, to process that in your mind while I'm receiving all this incoming from, I'm on a phone fight, just dealing with this, everybody wanting answers that night because we had 3 missions going on, and then there was talk that night of kicking us out, and that started right then and there. They said they're going to come out and do a second investigation, and you're just seeing. So, as a leader, when you're taught and shown by your leaders over time to absorb that pain, you're realizing, this heat's coming down on me, like 100%, and that's what happened. They fired me. Uh, they didn't want to ask any questions. Then that's when the generals got involved, and some of that. And I want to put some things into perspective. At the same time, Colonel Haas, who we worked for, he had Army Green Berets that were being investigated for using drugs, like hardcore drugs. Uh, he had other Green Berets that were being investigated for prostitution. He had other Green Berets that were being investigated for mutilation. And so, none of those had anybody kicked out of theater. And none of this said in the press by making comments like Colonel Nicholson did, and to the Pentagon press corps. I mean, all that was handled privately. And there's a lot in this book that I didn't cover, and you just see like, okay, a lot of people had it out for us. Could you say like, well, we screwed up, DJ? We Nothing's covered up in this book. Let
me ask you a question though.
Yes.
That brings something up, and I don't want this to sound like a gotcha question.
Yes.
I really don't want it to. But when you say that, did we screw up? Do you think you screwed up at all? Because reading the book, I don't see it. But now that you sit back, from 30,000 feet and look at it all these years later, was there anything that you could have done better? Was there anything that you could have done differently that you think would have changed this whole kind of scenario?
That's a good question. And for listeners, we haven't discussed this yet. I went to a second trial, and the reason I want to fast forward there real quick is because they asked me that question on the second trial that I went to at a board of inquiry in Okinawa after a subsequent deployment. But they asked me, do you think you could have done anything different? And my answer on the record, from the witness stand or from the stand was yes. I mean, anything, but I did my best. I did everything I was trained and I could have, but, could you have been somewhere, just by chance, could, luck or fate have brought you to an area where you could have stopped something and decided, but, we had trained to do multiple missions. I had for 11 months pushed to know answer to 3 questions. What is our mission going to be? Who will we be working for? Which geographic area of the Middle East will we be in? Iraq, Afghanistan, wherever. Never got an answer before we deployed. We got on ship and was told officially a couple of days after being on the ship, 11 months after I'd been, the commander, we were told we were going to Afghanistan. So, and DJ, the swamps of eastern North Carolina don't look a whole lot like the Tora Bora Mountains and the Khyber Pass in the middle of winter. So is there any blame? Yeah.
About as much as Kansas does.
Yeah. So, but here's the other side of the coin, and I'm not trying to take the heat off of me. This has been, I've worn this, I've owned this for 15 years. And I'm saying like, yeah, I could have been somewhere and done something a little bit different. That'd be great if that happened, but I was in our operations center, awake 20 hours a day, trying to do everything I could. But the United States Marine Corps has never stood up and said, we could have resourced these guys. We could have given them a logistician to order food and water and repair parts for their vehicle. We could have tried to figure out, when the Marine Corps says the most important thing is the mission, we could have figured out where this first and only unit that existed for 11 months, where they were going to be employed, who they were going to work for, what their mission. I mean, are they going to do just raids, reconnaissance? Are they going to do training, other units? They could have put some effort, but the Marine Corps has never once said they did anything wrong or could have done anything better. In that right there, when you see how they dogpiled on us, and, all we wanted is to stop being accused in the press of being war criminals. And they had a House Resolution 21 that was out there from 2017 to 2019 that the Marine Corps, the Commandant of the Marine Corps, all we were asking is for them to say we were not at fault in the ambush on 4 March 2007 in Badikou, Afghanistan. General Neller he was indifferent, never said a word. And so that is what is broken with our military. There's a lot of guys out there that hate me. There's a lot of senior officers that think that I broke ranks, that I was disloyal, and I was the officer that didn't just go down with the ship. But there's a lot of other Marines on the enlisted side that realized like officers didn't stand. No other officers stood up for their own guys the way that he did. And I didn't do it on Facebook. I'm not trying to name names, but you've seen somebody here this last year that, in his office in uniform. No, I didn't. I wasn't grandstanding. I wasn't trying to make a statement. I was trying to fight for the Marines. And a civil way as an officer and a gentleman that I was trained to be. But I was trained to be a warrior, and I did everything I could on the battlefield. I didn't leave anything on that field. But I do believe the Marine Corps failed us. And as one jury member, Lieutenant Colonel Steve Morgan, who's came out very publicly since the war, he wrote the foreword to this book. He's a man of incredible courage, integrity, and honor. Has said, that these leaders ultimately failed their country in America and the Marine Corps. So I don't shirk any responsibility that I had as a commanding officer. That was on my shoulders, and I bore it. I was relieved of command. I was given an adverse fitness report, and my career was terminated. I did serve to the last day that I could for 7 more years. But
I think you're kind of jumping ahead. Let's talk about June 6th for a minute, because this was of everything that happened in the first one. And I hope people go read this book and see everything, because we didn't even get into like the crime scene and the collection of evidence and the evidence that ended up in burn pits and all this, all these things that happened accidentally. June 6th. June 6th was crazy to me, because it was, if you could pick 180 degrees in the opposite direction of why they were mad at you for the March incident, happened here. You actually stood up to someone and said, "You're doing this wrong. The fire is coming in too close. You're going to hurt Marines."
Yes.
So I'm trying to figure out, they didn't want you to be aggressive. They didn't want you to back things off. What is it exactly that they wanted from you?
Yeah, good question. And so I think they wanted to hang this all on my head. And when I say I think, this is they wanted a scapegoat. And on the subsequent deployment, which you mentioned, 6th June, this was another deployment back to Afghanistan. I was the operations officer, and I had a battalion commander that I worked for. He was an intelligence officer, never been to Afghanistan, and he'd never, I'm not saying this boastfully, but my background is I did one tour outside of the operational forces. And that was an instructor at the Marine Corps' version of Top Gun. And there I learned as much as I could about aviation assets, joint aviation assets, unmanned surveillance drones, unmanned armed drones, everything I could. I was a single guy out there in the desert. And I think I've explained enough of my kind of mindset and philosophy. But when you're single in a man ranch like Yuma, Arizona, you don't have anything else to do. And you're just this guy that was committed, So I thoroughly enjoyed planning live close air support attacks by dropping ordnance off the rails of aircraft, attack helicopters, jets, using everything I could, drones. And that's what I really not just loved to do, but learned to do to perfection. And there was an ambush on 6th June 2011 in Sangin Valley, the upper Sangin Valley of Afghanistan. And this, at that time, was the worst, most violent, deadly place on planet Earth. I don't say that like some of these other chest beaters or Navy SEALs. It was just the worst place on planet Earth. On a previous deployment that the unit that I served with was on, which I was not on that previous deployment, but 3 Marines were compromised. They were captured. They were tortured. They were shot in the head, and their bodies were thrown off a cliff. The battalion commander was extremely indecisive, and for 50 minutes, that's 50 minutes, after we declared a troops in contact, that's when they started to get engaged. The enemy went from 275 meters down to 34 meters and enveloped them on 3 sides from multiple positions, hitting them with medium machine guns, small arm machine guns, AK-47s, and rocket-propelled grenades. So these guys were really feeling the heat, kind of trapped. They were they're bogged down in this canal. The battalion commander continued, there was this intel officer with no experience in fire support, no experience in close air support. I'm sure, just like the saying out of the lessons learned from Desert One, the hostage rescue attempt in Iran, that don't confuse enthusiasm with capability. I'm sure he may have felt good for himself, about himself, and that he was in charge. He was legally Title 10 U.S. Code. He was the man in charge. And when they declared a tick before he dropped, and over those 50 minutes, he wanted to talk to the lawyer and wanted to talk not to the platoon commander on the ground, the company commander, because that's the chain of command. The company commander wasn't in any kind of position to see what in the hell was even going on. But this guy was like, went to the Virginia Military Institute and trying to follow these procedures. Meanwhile, the clock's ticking. DJ, if you do that in a place like Singing Valley, you're allowing you're naive. You're stupid and you're derelict in your duties. If in law enforcement you're in a major gun battle and somebody's there that's waiting in some rear safe area for 50 minutes to dispatch backup, this is the equivalent of what I'm talking about. To me, this is immoral. This is somebody that's trying to cover their ass and, make these decisions. And anyway, we requested troops in contact that surges all available aviation support to our area. So we had two AV-8B Harrier jump jets flown by Marines. They were armed with 500-pound bombs. These are laser-guided bombs. So it's precision-guided munitions. We also had an armed drone up there, an MQ-9 Reaper. It had a Hellfire missile, which is, instead of a 500-pound bomb, this is uses a shape charge. So a conical explosion is used to defeat armor, and it only has 10 pounds of high explosives instead of a 500-pound bomb, which is a 50-50 mix of 250 pounds of high explosives and 250 pounds of shrapnel that blasts three-dimensionally. So this cone-shaped thing is made to go in and hit on the side of an armored vehicle and uses overpressure to penetrate and to implode the occupants of that vehicle. And that's the smarter, if you're a weaponeer and you've been trained out in Yuma as a weapons and tactics instructor, the course that I taught, you learned all the different weapons to use and match the appropriate weapon with the target. And that's what I was recommending, the appropriate solution. We also had a Marine Corps KC-130 Hercules aircraft, and the Marine Corps didn't get the AC-130s like the Air Force has, these very sophisticated and expensive Spectre gunships, which have howitzer cannon that just rain down death and shrapnel. So we didn't have that, but we had on one of the fuel wing stations of this Marine KC-130, they had this Harvest Hawk platform, and a Harvest Hawk can hold 4 of these. It's a Griffin missile. It's essentially a laser-guided javelin, so it has only 4 pounds of high explosive. It's also a shape charge, so this is the least amount. You could use it very non-invasively, really close when you get in a foul language distance type of a fight, and that's what they got into. So they were down to 34 meters. This air is up there. It's been delayed for 50 minutes, making any kind of a decision on bringing any of this to bear. The enemy's continually maneuvering around from building to building. And then the battalion commander, Lieutenant Colonel Homiak, decides, okay, I'm ready to drop a bomb now. I give him my recommendation to use either the Hellfire or the Griffin missile, the 4 or 10 pound shape charge. Because at this point in time, we're belt buckle close. They're really putting it on our lads who are in this ditch. We didn't know they were in a ditch. Now, I don't blame the platoon commander that's in the fight for that. That was his first true gun battle, and but he's in the fight. We didn't have a surveillance camera on the drone that could provide a feed to us where we could visually see. And this is in Singing Valley, so we're talking flat area, no relief. So we can't see the contour lines if they're in just a small ditch. That doesn't appear on our maps. So we thought he's in the open. And if you're dropping a 500-pound bomb with shrapnel blasting three-dimensionally, that the regulations state you can't drop it within 180 meters, I'm thinking that this guy's he's willingly killing his own guys. And he's making this choice when I'm shoulder to shoulder right next to him, stating we need to drop the Griffin missile or the Hellfire. So this guy who has literally no experience in dropping aviation ordnance, he's literally not qualified to do it. You have to go to the school, month-long school that we're trained to. And then, after that, I became an instructor. But this guy, zero, makes the worst possible call you possibly can. Some people think, like, isn't this a little too much? Is this guy? And people read, you can type in Lieutenant Colonel Homiak, Homiak, and you type in the news article, SOFREP, SOFREP, and you read this article, which has a link to a video. You see these bombs coming in, and you're like, okay, this is no embellishment whatsoever. And I'll get to what the Department of the Navy said about this guy and how this leader is still in circulation in the Marine Corps right now. But he drops a 500-pound bomb. It does nothing, has no impact because the enemy vacated the building that he dropped it on because they're maneuvering around. These guys, this is 2011. The stupid ones are all killed. And they're running circles literally around Lieutenant Colonel Homiak because he's somebody that would always leave work extremely early. I'd see him leave ahead of any other officers. It was pathetic. However, they were still requesting aviation ordnance after the first 500-pound bomb dropped. We dropped it 5 times inside the acceptable fratricide distance, which is immoral. 5 times inside what the regulations state we can drop it within, with the ordnance that is 64.5 times more high explosive than what I had been recommending. And then, but Lieutenant Colonel Homiak was not only was he taking my advice, he was proving a point to me that he's in charge. And when a leader has that ego and sees and feels that, some of the troops, they look up to Fred, and this major who's subordinate is eclipsing me, then they want to prove some points. And that's exactly what was going on. So not only did you drop the 500-pound bomb, but those Harrier jets checked off station, and he fired. Once the platoon that was under fire being enveloped, they continued to request for additional firepower because they were pinned down. They were just getting handed it to them. So he fires 2 surface fire rockets, HIMARS rockets, 675 pounds each. Fires them in open sheath formation. So it's not, these are driven by GPS satellite delivery. So it's closed sheath. They're going to hit within 1 meter. Boom, boom. He fires it in open sheath. So it spreads the shrapnel blast out. You can see this on the videotape that's in SOFREP, like I just mentioned to you. So our guys get rocked by these 2 surface-fired rockets, 675 pounds each. Again, 50-50 mix, high explosive and shrapnel blasting everywhere. And then when they get back, Lieutenant Colonel Homiak doesn't allow them to get screened for a traumatic brain injury, nor at the end of the deployment does he allow them to get screened for a traumatic brain injury then as well. That's dereliction of duty. That's showing you have complete disregard for your troops. And is that my opinion? Well, I come to question Lieutenant Colonel Homiak as soon as I got all the facts from when they returned from patrol. I debriefed him. I talked to Lieutenant Colonel Homiak about the tail of the tape, what happened. He said, Fred, I'm willing to sacrifice the lives of these Marines, and I need to make sure you will too. He said, come back to me and talk to me about this later that afternoon. So I did. And I'm sure he contacted his higher headquarters, letting him know that this maniac, yes, this is the same guy that slaughtered this village in Afghanistan years before right here, got away with it. So I talked to him later that afternoon as he asked, and he says the same thing. Again, DJ, this isn't what I've thought in my mind. This is what I have confirmed by another polygraph that I took by Terrence Victor O'Malley, who is still at that time also the president of the American Polygraph Association. And So he said it to me twice. Fred, I'm willing to sacrifice the lives of these Marines, and I expect you to do the same in the future. I told him, sir, I know that will needlessly kill Americans, and I have a duty to disobey an unlawful order. And he fired me right there. When I say I have a duty to disobey, I realize I've signed my into my career right there, because he's going to relieve me of my command no matter what. He's going to do this information warfare and paint this picture to the higher headquarters that this loose cannon, which he did. And he did a good job of it, slandering me, saying, he just wants to drop all this ordnance. Galvin's crazy, he murdered this village, but I'm the guy standing up and saying, stop. You don't know what you're doing. You can't do this. I'm not going to allow it. I'm not going to tolerate this. So I get relieved, sent back, explain all this to the commanding general, who backs up his battalion commander, sends me back to Okinawa. I get back to Okinawa and I write letters to 88 members of Congress, all members of the House and Senate Armed Services Committees, to my Kansas senators and the representative from my district that I was in Kansas. And I send another letter to the 3rd Marine Expeditionary Force Inspector General. They assigned me back to Okinawa. And it had the tail of the tape of exactly what happened, just like I described to you, the level of ordnance, the amount of time, and what Colonel Homiak said in my polygraph I put on there. It was a sworn statement. It was sent to 88 members of Congress on the 27th of November, 2011. Less than 1 month later, I had a signed letter from Lieutenant General Milstead, who is the Deputy Commandant of the Marine Corps for Manpower and Reserve Affairs in Quantico, Virginia, ordering me that he signed on Sunday, December 25th, on a 4-day weekend for all Marines. He felt compelled, probably ordered, but he signed a letter on Christmas Day, sending me to an involuntary separation board called a Board of Inquiry, which went to the Board of Inquiry. And again, if the Marine Corps thought I was lying, they would have just kicked me out for lying. They came up with this allegation that I was substandard. So here's a guy that's deployed more than any other Marine officer at that time, far more. I'm not boasting. I'm just stating a clear fact. And there's been in the infantry and reconnaissance, force reconnaissance, Marine Special Operations, and supposedly this female 2-star, Major General Angeline Salinas, who was the president of this board for promotion to lieutenant colonel, she said that's where they crafted this statement that said at the promotion board, and this had never ever happened in Marine Corps history. They said somebody at a promotion board, the president decided this guy needs to go because he's substandard. So this female Marine, who was a legal officer, not a lawyer, but like an adjutant, who'd been overseas one time in her career to Okinawa prior to the war, never heard or saw a round fired in anger, is saying, I'm substandard. The guy who signed up for every deployment I could possibly be. So I went to this Board of Inquiry in Okinawa, Japan, in March 2012. The 3-member jury found nothing to substantiate, and I was cleared to go. They said there was nothing wrong with me. I said, okay, I know. So I went back to work. My boss said, Fred, they're ordering you to get off this island. And I'm like, well, I have like less than 2 years. I'll just retire here in Okinawa. They said, no, call the monitor, the officer's assignments guy, and figure out where you want to go next. I said, well, I'll go where I started. If you send me back to Camp Pendleton, California, I'd like to go back to the West Coast. Or never been to Hawaii, so maybe Hawaii. Sent me to the East Coast. I wish. Never was stationed there while I was active duty. And then, so they sent me to Norfolk, Virginia, the Navy base. But that actually
that's pretty close to California.
Right around the corner.
Yeah.
And a Marine that you served 27 years, you have a lot of friends. You're probably not going to meet too many of them in Navy base. far away from any Marine base. I understand the selection that they made for me, but that ended up being a incredible briar patch that I really, literally am grateful for. It ended up leading to, I won't say exactly why, but it led me to get the job I have right now with Tesla, which is the best job I've had since leaving the Marines. And, working with young Marines in FAST, which is equivalent to, I'll make a comparison of, the Marines at all these American embassies overseas that are at the post one, that are ready to fight and protect those in the embassy if need be. I'll make a correlation. That's kind of like a black and white cop on the beat. They're there, permanent presence in case anything should happen. Where I was assigned to the East Coast, the Marine Corps Security Force Regiment, and they have an organization called FAST, which is akin to like a SWAT team. Its mission is to provide anti-terrorism security operations for vital naval or national assets. So as soon as I got there in the summer of 2012, Ambassador Chris Stevens started sending communications about what was the threat that was going on the ground in Libya. Department of State didn't want to put boots on the ground, wanted to make it appear going into an election cycle that peace was breaking out in Northern Africa. There's no there. So we had 2 forward stage platoons in Europe, and one of those platoons we put on ready alert with the Air Force, dedicated Air Force aircraft. They were tied to the hip for months with them. You're not training anymore. They're ready to go in at any time. But Ambassador Chris Stevens' communications, over 100 communications were ignored. Although we were prepared and ready to go, we sent a platoon in the day after Benghazi fell. That platoon held the Regional Affairs Office, that's what it's called, and the American Embassy for 90 days. And then we retrograded. So, there was no video that created anything that led to those Americans dying. That was other reasons, but again, senior levels of the United States government covered that up and lied, and led to inaction and indifference when there should have been decisive action and effective action taken ahead of time, because those Americans did not need to die. There's been no accountability for that. So one of the things I'd say to your listeners is, if you care about America, you better vote. And you better not vote for people that are indifferent, or people that run in circles with people who are indifferent. And I'm not saying one side or the other. They're all crooked like that. But you better find somebody that has some type of backbone and some type of integrity. Because I'm sure not seeing a lot of it. And these people that run campaigns, just the amount of money that it costs to run a campaign, they got to get millions of dollars. And usually they're going to be attached to some Geppetto that's going to be pulling their strings. So find somebody with some courage and integrity. I lived for the last 4 years in Hawaii, and I'm living in California. So I work for Tesla. I'm not, able to be bought, and I don't have any intentions. So don't ever try to tell me like, oh, you should run for office. I'm not like some of these grandstanders that think that they're going to change the world, and it's really about themselves. But we do need leaders to run our government, and that type of corruption that exists it's rampant. You need to look at who's on the boards of these military industrial complexes, which is so much money's spent by our tax dollars. And we don't need to get into a war, but we have to be strong. And right now, I'd say that everything that we're spending our money on, we're not getting in a discount. This isn't Pabst Blue Ribbon. We're paying high dollar. This is some blue label that we're paying for, but we're getting some sewer water in return. This is not the army that your granddaddy fought in World War II. This is a completely different, ineffective military, and don't let it continue to happen. So that's what I hope your listeners take away.
So the $1 million question. We didn't even get into Holly. I hope they read that in the book, and I hope they read this. But 2 wives, a COI, a BOI, being relieved of command twice. Was it all worth it?
I wouldn't do anything any different. And knowing the pain that a lot of people, I'm not talking pain for myself, that you ask, like, hey, you talk very highly about this guy that, kind of did something really stupid. He ended up getting cancer. He was a co-defendant on that trial. He was tried with me. He got cancer right at the end of that trial before the verdict was out. And, had to have some major surgery and radiation. So I've seen what this does to people when they're under extreme stress for long duration. The senior enlisted in that platoon that was on the patrol that was sitting in the vehicle right next to me ended up getting severe diabetes. And this was a sturdy lad, fit as you get. And when you're under this kind of extreme stress, knowing that what you did was right and true, and then you're being come after, that 49 prosecuting attorneys and criminal investigators are just raining down on you, that mentally breaks you down, and it psychologically and physiologically does some things in your anatomy. And I'm not a doctor, but what I saw happen to the minds and bodies of our Marines, that I would have to do the same and stand up for them. And in battle, when we fought and fight, I mean, thank God none of them were killed. So yes, I would do the same thing in those events as well. I would do the same thing for the last 3.5 years. These 3 personnel from Marine Special Operations Command, the same command that I was in, 2 Marine gunnery sergeants and a Navy corpsman. That's an enlisted Navy medic that's assigned to the Marine Special Operations, because we don't have our own Marines medical. They've been under fire for a separate incident. Won't totally go on because that's another long story. But I've been fighting, advising, connecting them with legal professionals, with legal defense funds, advocating in the media regarding this particular case, the MARSOC 3, putting it out on social media, raising awareness. Why? Because not just because they're worth it, but because there's very few other people who will stand up. And I don't think there's hardly anyone that has been through these types of events and is still currently actively in the media, social media, standing up and saying, this needs to stop. And if people aren't doing that, then it's going to continue. When you've seen people who have criminal minds, when they're not stopped, it emboldens them, and they think that the next time they'll get away with more. And just because they wear a uniform and people respect them, if they're doing things that are unethical, it creates that same thought process in their mind. Next time I can get away with more. That's these MARSOC 3. They've had at the 3-year, right before the 3-year mark, this Marine colonel from Headquarters Marine Corps in Washington, D.C., the Pentagon, came down to Camp Lejeune, North Carolina, and threatened 8 of these Marine defense attorneys, to include squaring off, shouldering up against one of the Marine defense attorneys, staff judge advocates, and stating, like, you may be protected by your fitness reports written by your direct superior. He said, but you will not be protected by that Marine lawyer who's the colonel on your promotion board. So he threatens these guys for doing their job at defending somebody, basically shattering their presumption of innocence, because now their defense is shattered, is compromised. And that is something that, DJ, you'd expect something like that to happen in Pyongyang or Tehran, but not in the United States Marine Corps. And but that Marine Colonel Shaw, nothing happened to him. He shifted to another job, but there was a media release here this week. He openly admits to other Marines that, this where he's laughing about it, and this one Marine earlier in his career who was gay got pummeled and beat up, and he just talks about it laughing, like, how he didn't do anything. And do we need leaders like that in 2022 who allow abuse, who threaten the defense attorneys because of their rank and position, because they're defending Americans who defended themselves? Their case in the MARSOC 3, they did what every Marine starting in boot camp. You learn this Marine Corps martial arts program, and if you're attacked, you're trained to use the minimal amount of force. And these guys were physically attacked. Somebody came in and clubbed one of the Marines twice in the face. Coming in the third time, another Marine came in with one punch, not two, not a kick, not a weapon, no foul language. They used the minimal amount of force. All three of these men are charged with homicide. And what's the greater implication, DJ, if you're out with your wife, family, or loved ones, and you can't defend yourself or your family or friends? And where are we as a nation when the Marine Corps is hunting these guys down like dogs and sending messengers like this Colonel Christopher Shaw threatening defense attorneys? I mean, do you think that a Marine with over 25 years in service accidentally said that to 8? And thank God those 8 defense attorneys all wrote sworn affidavits. But for those of you that want to ignore this, please read the information that's available about the MARSOC 3. Contact your Congress members. If you want to be able to do something, just please read about this and look at all the facts from every side. Make a decision. But one thing I ask that you don't do is don't be indifferent. Don't not make a decision and act. These 3 individuals need your help.
Well, speaking of reading, everyone needs to read this book. It's absolutely fantastic. Can you tell people where they can get it, where they can find more of you, and where they can get a couple more stories about you?
Sure. This book is available if you go online through Amazon.com. You need to check your Barnes & Noble, because some have had supply chain issues. But you can order it and get it very rapidly on Amazon.com. It comes in multiple forms, whether it's hardback, audio book through Audible. Victor Bavine read it, and then Kindle if they do electronic, or some people want to read that on their phone or a device. So it's available right now. It's been published. They can get in contact with me on social media, both on Twitter and Facebook at FC Galvin, and then also they can read more about the book at www.commandoshow.com. They can look up for more information right there.
Well, guys, I think that's going to be it for this week. Definitely go pick up this book, A Few Bad Men, Major Fred Galvin. It's an amazing story, an amazing book. I can't believe some of the stuff that came out in it. And I know that it was 2.5 hours, but we just scratched the surface with things that went on in the investigation with the COI and the BOI, plus personal stuff that went on in your life. And I thank you so much for coming on, being vulnerable, telling this story, getting that message out there about what's happening, about what happened with this. Guys, I think that's going to be about it. If you want some more of me, you can find me on Instagram at DTD_podcast. You can find me on Facebook at the DTD Podcast. You can find me on YouTube at the DTD Podcast, where all these conversations are in video form. But the one-stop shop to get everything is dtdpodcast.net. You can get audio, video, pictures of Fred, more to the story, layouts of the map and the book, and see way more about this story than we covered on here. Also, don't forget, go to our sponsor, Police Coffee, at policecoffee.com. It's an officer-owned business dedicated to crafting the finest coffees and blends and shipped as soon as they're made to provide you with the freshest coffee available. Each batch is roasted fresh by people who know what it means to stay vigilant, and their specialty coffees do not waste one drop when flavor is concerned. Their coffee's some of the best you'll find, but it also serves an important cause, and I drive this home each week. They give back to our community. 50% of their profits go towards helping family members of police officers who fell in the line of duty. And when you go to policeofficer.com, you can get your order, put in DJK10, and you get 10% off your order. Guys, come check us out next week for the next story, but make sure you go pick up this book, Barnes & Noble, Amazon, Kindle. It's got the audio version. I've heard both the audio version and read the Kindle version, and they are absolutely fantastic. That's Fred. I'm DJ. This has been the show. We'll catch you guys next week. See ya.